Hello, and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host, Rob. I wanted to go back and talk more about multi-classing. This is kind of something that I enjoy a lot, and I've done a lot of videos on in the past, including a series of multi-classing guides, which in my opinion are kind of my magnum opus on this channel. But recently, while playing, well actually it's after we finished our latest game of Saltmarsh, in which Jaden's character died. This is it. So he's now on his 5th character in the campaign, and we're level 9. He was asking me between the 3 campaigns that I'm playing in with him right now. I have my Sorlock in the Saltmarsh campaign. I have a Sorcedin in our Princes of the Apocalypse campaign, and I have a Ranger who just took his first level in Fighter. So I got 5 levels of Ranger, 1 level Fighter in our Dungeon of the Mad Mage campaign. And he was asking me, like, out of those 3, which one do I enjoy playing the most? And I said, hands down, it is Ning Ning, my Sorlock. And I think he was a little surprised by that, because like the Ranger fighter, that guy does so much damage, it's ridiculous. I've got hand crossbow with the crossbow expert feat. I've got sharpshooter. I'm a Gloomstalker, so I've got 3 attacks in the opening round, plus the bonus action attack, which brings me up to 4. I'm about to get Action Surge next level. His damage is already crazy. It is going to be insane. But I also find that as much as I enjoy playing him, he is basically good at dealing lots and lots of damage. And that's about it. And that's a fine thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But the thing I love about my Sorceress is that I feel like she can really contribute to the game no matter what is happening. I might not be the best in any pillar of play, but there's nothing where I'm ever, like, if you ever played like a barbarian and you have to cross a giant chasm and you're like, well, hope the wizard has fly. There's nothing you can do. You can't really contribute. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're making a barbarian, you know going in what your role is, right? That's fine. But I'm saying that out of the 3 characters I'm playing, the one I really enjoy the most is the one that can actually contribute everywhere. And so I want to kind of talk about that, and let's go back to my main reasons why I like to multi-class, because it turns out this character is actually kind of accidentally an example of all 3 of these 3 things I'm looking for, and actually in the order in which I prioritize them too, which is kind of interesting. Not really how I planned, but maybe it was just subconscious. So the basic idea, when I'm multi-classing, I'm looking to take something that I'm already good at and then add another class that can help me get better at that. Now, a quick example would be, let's say we've got a paladin and we want to smite a lot, right? We're just basically a smite machine. We don't really care about casting a lot of spells. Not saying we never do, but basically you're like, you know what? I just want to smite. There's nothing wrong with that. Smite machines are fine. But then you're like, I only have 2 attacks around. How could I do this better? Well, maybe we decide, what if we took 2 levels of fighter? And then we can get Action Surge. Now, when we have our big boss fight, I could attack 4 times in one of the rounds, and I could smite on all 4 of those attacks. That is actually just way better. This is how I like to think when I'm like, okay, I want to take the main strategy for my core class, which is just smiting, and then we're going to make it better by adding something else that will improve our smiting. Now, we could also take a feat like Polearm Mastery or something like that, right? But we can still do that with our levels of fighter. The point is, we're taking something from fighter or some other class that's going to make us better. Now, we only need 2 levels of fighter for that, so this is pretty good. But let's take a look at number 2 here. Covering for weaknesses or gaps in our core class. Now, let's say we're using a great weapon on our paladin, and we took the great weapon fighting style. Well, even if we're in full plate armor, we're going to have a maximum of 18 armor class, unless we get magic armor, but that's not going to take, that's going to be a while, right? We can't use a shield because we're using a great weapon. So what if from fighter we pick up the defensive fighting style? Right? And now we've got that +1 to our armor class. It's not huge. It's not as good as a shield would be, but it does complement what we're already doing, right? And we could be the other way around too, right? We could take defensive from Paladin, and then we're like, hey, you know what? What's going to boost our damage a bit? Let's take Great Weapon Fighting. Because obviously we're not taking Protection. We're not taking Archery. We're not taking any of the other ones. We've got a Great Weapon. That's what we're doing, right? Now, I wouldn't ever multi-class into Fighter for the defensive fighting style. To me, that's just not really worth it. But if I'm going there for Action Surge, anyways, we're getting this on the way. We're getting this with first level. We can also get our bonus action heal from, what's it called? Whatever. Bonus action heal. Now, again, this isn't going to scale very well because it's going to go off our fighter levels. So if we only have 2 levels of fighter, a D10 plus 2 isn't great. But the fact that it's a bonus action is kind of nice because Cure Wounds is going to take an action. Lay Hands is going to take an action. If we're ever like, you know what, I'm down to like 9 or 10 hit points, I could really use a bit of a top me up, then just being able to heal yourself in those kind of situations is fine. Also, using this to heal yourself leaves some charges of Lay Hands available to heal your allies, which is perfect fine. Again, would I multi-class in just for healing? What is it called? Second Wind. There we go. Second Wind. No, of course I wouldn't. But, again, we're getting it on the way. Now, an interesting thought is, what if we took 3 levels of Fighter? Because there are still more core weaknesses for Paladin that we might want to close up. Now, maybe you're like, you know what? I wanted to take Great Weapon Fighting, but I'm afraid that -5 penalty is just going to suck too much. Well, we could take a 3rd level fighter, which would give us Battle Master potentially, and we could be using the Precision Strike to help us overcome that -5 hit penalty. Maybe we don't care about that. Maybe we just want to crit more and drop bigger smites, in which case taking Champion could be fine. But the example I like is, what if we took a 3rd level fighter and we went Eldritch Knight? Eldritch Knight, the 3 levels of fighter, this is one of the problems with the 2 levels of fighter. They aren't helping our spellcasting at all. And we're already bad enough as a paladin. We're already a half caster. But the 3rd level fighter will now give us the 3 fighter levels combined, the equivalent of 1 casting level. In other words, that 3rd level fighter is the same value as a full level of wizard or sorcerer or cleric or druid or whatever else, right? That 3rd level fighter gives us the same return. In which case, we now manage to progress our spellcasting a little bit. And we can cover for some of the weaknesses in our class, such as, we already said, we don't have a shield because we're using a great weapon. So we could pick up the shield spell. We could pick up a spell like Absorb Elements. We could pick up something like Find Familiar, which I would put down here in the utility section. It could help us scout. It could take the help action for an ally who's attacking after us and give them an advantage on one of their attacks. And we aren't really sacrificing that much. We've already taken the first 2 levels. That 3rd level isn't really that bad. Now, if your campaign's going all the way to 20, and you're like, yeah, but I kind of wanted that 30-foot aura on aura protection, because that's an absolute game changer, well, you're right. In which case, that 3rd level fighter probably isn't going to be worth it, because then you won't be able to get it. But if you don't care about the aura, or maybe your campaign's going to like 12 or 13, and you're like, you know, like, if I end up with like 9 levels of paladin or 10, there's not really a difference there, right? I might as well just take like an extra level of fighter instead. And that could be really valuable. I mean, you might even take a 4th level if you really wanted a feeder and ASI that badly, but I don't know that that's really necessary. Point is, you can take a look at, like, I'm going there for my core feature, which is Action Surge, but along the way, I can take care of some of these other areas. Another thing that we could grab from the Eldritch Knight would be a ranged cantrip for damage, because this is one problem we have as a paladin a lot, is we just have a complete lack of range attacks. So let's add in a ranged attacks here. Obviously, that is never going to be our core tactic. We're not going to be like, oh, I can't wait to get in a fight and then firebolt. You know, that's not what we're trying to do. But if your choice is we firebolt the flying creature that's 100 feet overhead, or we attack it with a crossbow once, because obviously we don't have crossbow expert on our melee paladin, and we probably have a terrible dex because we're running around in full plate armor. We didn't prioritize dex at all. You're better off firebolting. So in those cases where we can't get into combat, or maybe the fight starts and we're 100 feet away, and we're like, I could move, and then I could use my action to dash, and then I still can't get into combat, or I could just move and then I could firebolt. And then if they move up, maybe next round I'll be able to get into melee range. Either way, this is kind of the idea of what I'm looking for. So let's forget about the example of the fighter, and let's talk a little bit about my actual sorceress. So I've spoken about this character a bunch of times in the past. The basic idea that we wanted to have was we went with the Aberrant Mind sorcerer, and we added some warlock. And the idea was, because the Aberrant Mind sorcerer has spells like Hunger of Hadar and Ered's Black Tentacles already on the spell list, this can give us some nice persistent effects that can really be useful in combat. The problem with all these spells tends to be, though, once enemies move out of these effects, they've kind of run their usefulness. I have seen so many times where somebody dropped a Hunger of Hadar, they did a bit of damage to the enemies at the start of their turn, and then they just moved out. Now, maybe they were in the middle of the Hunger of Hadar, in which case, because of the difficult terrain caused by Hunger of Hadar, maybe they had to use their dash action, in which case you essentially did crowd control them for one round of combat, no saving throw. That's not the worst, right? They weren't able to attack, they weren't able to cast a spell, they had to move and then use their action to dash to get out of Hunger Hadar. But at this point, they're now out, and I'm concentrating on a spell that isn't doing anything else. Like, I could have cast Slow with that, I could have cast Hypnotic Pattern, I could have cast Fear. There's a lot of other spells I could have used that would have actually just done a better job. But the idea is that if we combine this with Warlock, we could take Eldritch Blast with Repelling Blast, plus I also decided to take Agonizing Blast just for a bit of damage. We don't really need it. This isn't a damage-focused character, but we're already Eldritch Blasting him. We might as well do a little bit more with it. Why not? I think Lance of Lethargy might have been okay too, but it doesn't scale particularly well because you can only slow them once, and, the extra damage does scale, so why not? We'll go with that. Either way, the idea is we're going to use the spells and then push them back in. So this was the core idea of the class. We're going to take a class that has some pretty good crowd control with the sorcerer, and we're going to add the forced movement from the warlock to make it even better. Now, when I first did my Salty and Saltmarsh videos, I talked about, like, when Ning Ning was level 1, she almost died like 4 times in our opening scenario as a level 1 sorcerer, right? And by the time we were level 3, the ranger died. Maybe he died at 4. I don't know. It was pretty early on. And we were having some brutal fights. Like, this DM is not taking it easy on us, to say the least. In addition to Jaden having 3 character deaths and a character retire, another player, Trish, she was playing a cleric. That character decided to retire, but the DM just kind of killed her off just to make it more dramatic. But she was retiring anyway, so it was fine. She'd already talked to him about it. She then made a bard. She didn't like the bard, but then one of the other players' girlfriends decided she did like the bard, and she wanted to play the bard. But that only lasted a few weeks, and then the bard died, and we spent a bunch of gold to take her to a temple and get her resurrected. And then the player was like, actually, I think I'm good. We're like, really? She's like, you just want to play something else then? She's like, nah, I'm good. I'm like, oh, well, can we get our gold back? And the DM's like, no, you guys already resurrected her. I'm like, son of a gun. Like, So now she's playing a Gloomstalker Ranger, and she's much happier with it. And then we have the Rogue, who's recently multiclassed into Fighter. he does a lot of damage too. So I'm very happy with those two. He also died at least once, and we got him resurrected in the temple. And then I think he might have died another time, but that was back when we had the cleric, and she was able to revivify him, because by complete fluke, she also went unconscious in the combat, which was probably a good thing, because it meant she didn't spend her last 3rd level spell slot on Spirit Guardians, and she was able to revivify him when we revived her. So, that's how that played out. The only person who hasn't actually died is my sorcerer. And like I said, it's been a tough campaign, but that's okay. Sometimes that's kind of good. Anyway, so at that point I decided, you know what? Let's take a look at number 2. Covering for the weaknesses or gaps in our core class of sorcerer. How do we do that? Well, I didn't really want to go Hexblade, but it turned out the answer was going Hexblade. Just getting medium armor and a shield was such a big boost. It's just an absolute game changer. Plus, just having some more hit points in general. She's actually become like a defensive fortress almost, which is really surprising. Now, it wasn't my idea, but again, we were already going Warlock for the push from Eldritch Blast, and along the way, we're like, well, let's take care of some of the holes in our defenses. And it turns out medium armor and a shield was the way to go. Utility. We haven't really done much about this so far, but after talking to my friend Rob Vera, he suggested I just take a 3rd level of Warlock and go back to the chain and get a familiar. Probably an imp, but I can change it, of course, right? And this would give me a lot more utility. It can help people. It can do others. It can help scout. It can do stuff like that, right? Now, do we need it to help scout really badly? Not really. We have a Gloomstalker Ranger with expertise on stealth, and we have a Rogue with expertise in stealth. The Ranger also has Pass Without Trace, and the Rogue also has a Cloak of Elvenkind. But one thing that can be nice is just sending the imp with one of them, because I can see through the imp's eyes and be in telepathic contact. And then, if we're splitting the party, because the Rogue wants to go ahead and scout, if he gets in trouble, we'll know instantly, which is actually really, really nice. So, adding the Warlock helped to cover for some of that. Utility, like I said, our utility isn't great yet, but next level we're taking our 3rd level Warlock, and that'll get better. So if I look at Ning Ning and the Pillars of Play here, right? Exploration. This is clearly currently her weakest category. She's not like F tier, I'm not like a fighter tromping around in full plate trying to make stealth rolls with disadvantage, but I'm not helping the party much in this category either. I do have my telepathic speech for my subclass, so there are times when I can kind of like relay information back to the party, but this is pretty minor. However, once we have the imp, and it can scout and fly and be invisible, and it can help other people, like I said, I think this will help a lot. It'll definitely allow me to assist other people. And this is one thing I want to point out to you. When we're looking to help other people in their areas of expertise, I want to be very careful that I do not try to outshine them. I do not want my imp to do all the scouting instead of the rogue, because the rogue likes to explore. He likes to scout. That's kind of why he made that character. But there are times when he's kind of worried about it, because he's like, I don't know. But now, like, when I told him at work today, I'm like, one of the coolest things is I could send my imp with you, and then if you get in trouble, we'll know instantly. And since I have a helmet teleportation, and I can see through the imp's eyes, we can just teleport to where you are. And he's like, holy crap, that's the greatest idea ever. And he absolutely loved it. And now, instead of me trying to take over the exploration pillar, I'm just helping him. I'm taking somebody who's already really good at that and just being like, now you can do it a little more safely. And he was totally down for that. So another thing that I think is very valuable about familiars, this is, it's not as much of a problem in modern D&D, but it used to be a problem in a lot of old school dungeons, and that was instant death traps and death portals and everything else, right? as I take a drink there. So the most famous example of this would be the Green Devil face in the Tomb of Horrors, right? Now that's the kind of thing where you don't want the rogue to be like, well, I guess I'll check out the Green Devil face. But if I have an imp and I don't know what's in the Green Devil face, I could be like, you know what? Let's just send my familiar in. And if it dies, I'm out 10 gold. I just resummon them. It's not a big deal. That's way better than losing the rogue or the ranger. There's a very funny... I was watching XP Level 3, D&D channel there, and they did Tomb of Horrors at one point as like a level 20 one-shot. And they decided to check out the Green Devil face. They tied a rope around one of the characters. And one of the characters, she's like, okay, I got a bunch of rope in my pack. I got like 50 feet of rope. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to tie the rope around her, and then we're going to lower her down, right? But instead of just lowering her down, the girl who gets the rope tied around her, she just decides to sprint and dive headfirst into the Green Devil face. And the way the girl who had the rope explained it was so funny, because she's just like, at first I thought it was going to be good and we were going to like just lower her down and everything was going to be fine. But then she just ran at it head first, which was pretty funny, but I was a little worried. And then she jumped in, and at first it's like, oh, is anything happening? And suddenly my rope went slack. And when I pulled it back, I knew my rope was never going to come back. And that was her takeaway. She ruined her rope. There's also some other ones. I think, was it Shrine of the Kotoa, which had a portal that would take you straight to the elemental plane of water, I think. There were a few things like that in old school dungeons. And then they would justify it by saying, like, oh, you just needed to find the note that told you not to take the third portal that was green, and it's like, oh, you mean the note that was invisible and was also in some foreign language that nobody could speak and behind 4 secret doors? So, all we had to do was find 4 secret doors, detect invisible, read the invisible writing, probably with comprehend languages, and then solve the puzzle of the cryptic message that was going to reveal that we take the first 2 portals, but the third portal is instant death. All right, thank you for that. I feel completely that was totally fair and justified. Anyway, there were old school dungeons that had that. It's not so much anymore, but there are situations where you're like, oh, I don't know where this is going to go. I guess I'm just going to go through and hope for the best. Well, send your familiar. Anyway, that's enough about the exploration pillar. We already talked about it too much. Social. Now, this is another category where my character is not really the best, but she's not bad either. Now, like I said, we used to have a bard who was like absolute S tier in the social pillar. Obviously, I am not that. I do not have a subclass that gives me a bunch of charisma stuff. I do not have expertise on persuasion. I do not have the same spell list as the bard where you can afford to specialize in a lot of that kind of stuff. But that being said, just by virtue of having high charisma, plus I do have like suggestion on my spell list, and I have detect thoughts as one of my psionic spells. So there are moments where I do get to help out. And like I said, just by virtue of having a high charisma plus proficiency on persuasion, it's not as good as expertise, but it's not nothing, there are chances where I can kind of do this. Obviously not as well as the bard did, but at this point I am the party face, so like it or not, I am participating in the social pillar no matter what. And things like suggestion can help with that a lot, so it could be a lot worse, that's for sure. Not too much more to say. Let's move on to combat. Now, I break combat into a bunch of different subcategories, as you can see. And this is because combat, to me, is the most important pillar of play. If your character is going to die, they are probably going to die as a result of combat. That's just the way it normally goes, You could die exploring. You could die because of, some social faux pas where you made the king angry or something. But most character deaths come as a result of combat, including all of Jaden's in this campaigns. So, damage. Again, this is one area where the sorceress is pretty weak. She's not meant to be a damage character. I do have Eldritch Blast. I have some damage spells. I have a Staff of Power, which helps a lot, because now it can cast Fireball for me. Because I decided not to take Fireball in this character, because I always take Fireball. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try something different. And then there's been 1,000 times where I've been like, man, I wish I would have taken Fireball, because that would have been great. Oh, I also don't have Fear or Hypnotic Pattern, because guess what the Bard had? And so now I don't have some of the better crowd control spells, but we'll get to that under control. Well, point is, my damage is kind of weak, but our Gloomstalker Ranger has Sharpshooter and Dread Ambusher in the opening round, so she's attacking 3 times in the opening round with Sharpshooter. Our Rogue Fighter multi-class has Crossbow Expert with a hand crossbow, and he also has Sharpshooter. So I don't really need to do that much damage. They are already doing a truckload of damage. And like I said, this character wasn't built for damage, so I'm okay with that. Now, there are some things I can do to help, right? Like I said, I do have a Staff Power. I can cast Fireball, Lightning Bolt, Cone of Cold, and some other stuff, right? We have that. Once I get 5th level spells, which I don't have, I currently only have level 4 spells for Sorcerer, we're going to grab Synaptic Static, which is another great spell with a bit of a debuff on it as well. And we do have some spells like Magic Missile. Magic Missile is normally okay, but if you combine Magic Missile with Hexblade's Curse, because Hexblade's Curse is an ability, not a spell, so I can cast it and use a leveled spell both in the same round, and it's a bonus action. Magic Missile is an action, so no conflict there. Currently, with a +4 proficiency bonus, it means my Magic Missiles, instead of doing a d4 +1 each, are doing a d4 +5 each. And that's obviously much, much better. And it scales fairly well. This is not, by any means, one of my main tactics, but there are times when I have disadvantage from an attack, because maybe I'm blind or poisoned or whatever, or not blinded, but I'm poisoned or whatever, and would have disadvantage. And then just being able to Magic Missile something is fine. Also, there's times where I'm worried that it has a really high armor class and I won't hit it with Eldritch Blast. The thing about Magic Missile is, unless they have a shield spell, it's just safe, reliable damage. Especially if you're using it with Hexblade's Curse, which just makes it way better. So, while my damage is weak, I do have the ability to occasionally spike up. And I will say that so things like magic items, right? I do not count magic items as highly as I would having a spell innately or a subclass ability innately. This is because you might lose those magic items. You might attune to something different. Now, in the Staff of Power's case, it's very unlikely I'm going to attune to something different, right? But just saying, in general, that could be an issue, right? That being said, I also think that not accounting for the items you have is also a little disingenuous. Like, so the 3 items I'm currently attuned to, I've got a +1 Bloodwell Vial, I've got my Staff of Power, and I've got a Helm of Teleportation, right? The Helm I could give up at some point by just giving it to another party member, like maybe I get a Robe of the Archmagi at some point, right? In which case I'm like, yeah, I'd rather have this. But the Helm of Teleportation is just way too useful. So I would just see if somebody else has a free attunement slot or wants to trade out one of their other attunement slots for the Helm, and they could take that, right? Because one of the things is, I was going to take Teleportation as one of my 7th level spells, but because I have the Helm, I don't need to now, right? That does change the way you're going to play the character. If you have, like, let's say you wanted to use, I don't know, like web, but then you get a wanted web immediately. Maybe you'd still take web, but maybe you don't need to now, right? Like, these things do matter. Is it as good as having the spell innately? No, but it's not nothing either, right? So that's why I mention it. So let's move away from damage. Like I said, the damage is never the main priority of this character, but even just plucking away a couple times with Eldritch Blast is kind of decent damage. I'm not really using Hex very often. I'm not really using it as a damage boost, because usually my first turn is to cast some sort of control spell And then after that, I'm pushing guys in or, whatever else, right? So, like I said, damage is not really my priority. Let's move on to control, though. And this, as I've already said, is my character's priority. This is kind of what we're doing the most, right? So, we actually have a lot of really good options in here. We've already talked about the ones we get on our spell list, right? We get Hunger of Hadar. We get Evard's Black Tentacles. Those ones we got for free. I have the slow spell as well because slow is very handy, especially when we had a bard with Hypnotic Pattern. One of the things that Hypnotic Pattern is just better than slow, usually, in my opinion. The effects of slow, while really nice, none of them are as good as incapacitating an enemy. However, there are a lot of things that are immune to the charmed condition, and this is especially true as we level up. You start fighting more constructs and fiends, and a lot of Fae are immune to the charmed effect. A lot of undead are. You're not usually fighting a lot of celestials, but if you do, a lot of them are too, right? And you just start getting, like elementals are, you just start getting a lot of enemies that are. And as a sorcerer, if you're a wizard, you can afford to have both, right? You can. But as a sorcerer, it gets really hard when you're, a 7th level sorcerer with 8 known spells usually. It's hard to justify, am I going to take Fireball and Slow and Hypnotic Pattern and Counterspell? Like, that's a lot of 3rd level spells when I only have 8 spells total, That gets really hard to fit in. So, one nice thing with Slow is that it's just viable on way more targets. And this is why, even after we lost the Bard, I haven't bothered to change Slow out. Slow is still a great choice for me. We also have a couple of... we will have Telekinesis. We don't have it yet, but it's on the Aberrant spell list, so we'll get that when we have 5th level spells. These are all nice, but they all use concentration. So what do we have for non-concentration? Well, one of the big ones that we have is Tasha's Mind Whip. I love this spell. It's only a 2nd level spell, so it's pretty cheap. I currently have it as one of my psionic spells because I switched something else out for it. And this allows me to cast it with sorcery points or use a 2nd level spell slot, whichever one I want, right? Which gives me some nice flexibility. And if I cast it with sorcery points, it counts as being subtle spelled. It can't even be counterspelled. Now, Tasha's Mind Whip really shines when you're fighting things that can't make ranged attacks or cast spells. This is a combination that I've been able to use a few times with party members in both this campaign and the Prince's Apocalypse, because in that one I'm playing a paladin sorcerer, but we have a bard in that party who uses Tasha's Mind Whip a lot. And the best way to use it, I find, like I said, if you have an enemy that can't do anything but melee attacks, which is a surprisingly high number of enemies, right? You Mind Whip them. If they fail their saving throw, then you make your attacks, which your martial characters make their attacks, and then they just move away because it can't take a reaction, so it can't make an opportunity attack. And then on its turn, it has to move. But Tasha's Mind Whip, they only get their move, their action, or their bonus action. So if it moves, it can't take an action to attack you. And if it doesn't move, it can't attack you because it doesn't have ranged attacks or spellcasting. So you can have your guys just attack, move away safely, no opportunity attack, and then it doesn't even get to attack at all. This is a phenomenal way to use a spell, and it's really easy to do, right? You just need somebody in melee combat or somebody who's close enough to move in, hit it, and then move away again. No problem. I've also been able to use Tasha's Mind Whip in a couple cases where I've had something like Hunger of Hadar up, right? So this would be a case where I cast Hunger of Hadar round 1, somebody takes some damage, and then they move out. In the next round, I could quicken cast a Tasha's Mind Whip, and if they fail, I use my action to cast a cantrip, but that's okay, that's Eldritch Blast, right? We push them back into the Hunger of Hadar. Hopefully I hit them twice, and then we push them 20 feet back in, Because now on their turn, they can either move, take an action, or a bonus action, right? And if they move, because of the difficult terrain, they're probably not going to be able to get out of the Hunger of Hadar. And they can't take an action to dash because they either move or get an action. It's one or the other, right? So they're probably stuck in there, and now they can't even get out. So they took a bit of Hunger of Hadar action at the beginning of their last turn. Now they're taking some Eldritch Blast attacks from this one, and now they're taking more Hunger of Hadar at the beginning and end of their turn. The other one that I have that I like using a lot is Raltham's Psychic Lance. This one is kind of an upgraded version of Tasha's Mind Whip. Although, to be fair, I still use a lot of Tasha's Mind Whip just because it's only the second level spell slot. And Psychic Lance does quite a bit of damage. Again, it's an intelligence saving throw, psychic damage. This one incapacitates. And this is the one I would prefer to use on casters, assuming they aren't wizards. Because the wizard's probably going to have a good intelligence saving throw. They might actually pass. But against like clerics and druids and stuff like this spell is excellent because it incapacitates them. And they automatically lose concentration on whatever they're concentrating on. Unlike, say, Tasha's Mind Whip, which is less effective on them because they don't have to move, right? The fact that they only get to move or cast a spell as their action, they don't care because they're just going to cast the spell. So that one's not quite as good. Not saying this bad, because even if you just have guys up in their face, that can be really uncomfortable for a spellcaster when they can't get away, right? They might be sitting there looking at that Misty Step and thinking like, but if I Misty Step, I can't do anything else. I can't even move. And they're just going to move back up to me again and keep beating on me. So I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying I prefer the Psychic Lance against non-wizards. And of course, we can't forget Eldritch Blast, the, infinitely renewable cantrip that is the kind of staple of all of our control, essentially, right? I will also say that because of the Staff of Power, I also have Wall of Force. This is not available to sorcerers usually, and this is one of the best control spells in the game. That's not supposed to be F of Force, that's supposed to be Wall of Force, not Fall of Force. Wall of Force is excellent. And so the fact that I got that in the Staff of Power just makes me so happy. I can't believe I even have a Staff of Power. I'm only level 9. But whatever. DM rolled for random treasure, and boy did I get lucky. The rogue, on the other hand, got a +2 hand crossbow, which, while great for him, is, it's not a Staff of Power. Let's just put it that way. Anyways, that's control. I think we get the basic idea there. This character is built for control. Obviously, she's going to be good at it. This is the main reason why we multi-classed, to combine these two strategies, right? The control spells plus the Eldritch Blast. Survivability. Now, I already mentioned this character is just surprisingly tanky. And so much of that is because of the Warlock. And like I said, I almost wasn't going to take the Hexblade just because I wanted to play something different, and Hexblade is, it's almost too good. But that was the problem. It was just too good. I couldn't pass it up. As much as I have regretted not taking Fireball a bunch of times, I would have regretted even more taking anything other than a Hexblade Warlock. So currently I'm wearing a Mithril Breastplate, which is 14 armor class. So that's 14 AC, right? I have my dex is 16, but we're only getting a +2 because, of course, we don't have medium armor master, right? We have a Sentinel Shield, which is, again, another 2 armor class from there. It does give us advantage on initiative rolls, though, which is nice, because I also have Alert, and between that and my dex and the Sentinel Shield, I'm basically rolling an initiative with a +8 and advantage. So that is excellent on a control character where I want to be casting my Black Tentacles before everybody has a chance to move and engage my characters and melee combat, and now I'm hitting them, or everybody's right at the edge of Black Tentacles, and then it's easy for them to get out, etc., right? Either way, this is pretty good. So this is already giving me 18 armor class. But the Staff of Power also gives you +2 to your armor class, and it gives you +2 to all your saving throws as well as your spell attack rolls. So currently, my character is sitting on 20 armor class, and I'm a sorcerer. I have the highest armor class in the entire party. The Paladin has a 19. He has Adamantite Plate and the defensive fighting style. And before the Paladin, he was playing his Gnomish Artificer, the Battlesmith. And he also had 19 armor class. So I've had the highest armor class basically forever. And combined with the fact that I'm usually positioned towards the back, I also have spells like Misty Step that I picked up from the Fey Touch feat. So if I do get people on top of me, it's very easy for me to just reposition myself and move away, right? And then, like I said, I've got good saving throws. I also have spells like Armor of Agathis. Now, obviously, Armor of Agathis is way better on a melee character where you're able to do that reflective damage, right? You get the temporary hit points, and when they hit you, they take damage as well, right? But that only happens against melee attacks. However, there have been times when I just took a truckload of damage from something, and I was like, you know what? Maybe just give myself like 15 or 20 temporary hit points is not a bad call. You know, that might be the best thing I can do right now. I could even quicken cast it, and then I could still fire off an Eldritch Blast or whatever else I need to do, you know, get my double blasts off. And it's definitely not the worst thing ever. The fact that you can kind of scale it to whatever spell level you want to use makes it pretty flexible and pretty nice, you know? It's definitely not terrible. Obviously, for survivability, we also have Counterspell, one of the best defensive spells in the entire game. And we have Globe of Invulnerability from the Staff of Power, which, while not my favorite spell, can be pretty handy a lot of times. Oh, somehow I managed to miss Web off of our control list. Obviously, that was an absolute staple for a long time. I prefer using the Ewo's Block Tentacles these days, but Web was obviously, you know, a huge staple of our offense in the earlier levels when I could just push guys back into the webbing, right? Same tactic, just a lower level spell. I still have Web though, because sometimes you can use Web on flyers and it'll bring them down, and yeah, the web disappears at the start of the next round, but that's at the start of the next round. In the meanwhile, we grounded the flyer, they probably took some falling damage, and maybe my Ranger or Eldritch Knight or a Barbarian or Artificer or Paladin, whatever character happens to be alive this week, can also lay the beats on them while they're prone and laying on the ground, right? Definitely not a bad thing. So between armor class, the ability to give ourselves more temporary hit points, defensive spells like Counterspell, and just our ability to position ourselves and stay ranged, because even though we're a Hexblade Warlock with armor, we are not fighting up at the front. I am a caster standing at the back. I'm just doing it with 20 armor class. And by the way, the armor class has lots of room to grow, right? The Mithril Breastplate is really no different than a non-magical breastplate other than the weight restriction. And I guess I can wear it while sleeping, which is nice as well, right? In case we get ambushed while we're asleep, which could happen. But it's not like a +1, 2, or 3. And the Sentinel Shield, well, very nice as well, it's just giving me the 2 armor class that a regular shield would give me. So imagine if we had, like, you know, a +3 breastplate or half plate and a +3 shield. Like, that armor class could be way higher than it is now. We could get up to 26, 27. You know, I'm granted that was a +3 gear. That'd be a higher level. But we could get it up to 23, 22 pretty easily if we just had magic stuff, you know, besides this, right? None of that is bad at all. Obviously, survivability has been really good on this character. I'm the only person who hasn't died, and like I said, it has been a very challenging campaign. To give you an idea, like this last adventure where the Artificer died, we were fighting in an environment for the boss fight. Now, because this is after the Artificer died, so we didn't win this fight. I just teleported us out because I was afraid we were about to TPK. So I'm like, hell with teleportation time. but the air was poisonous, and there was no saving throw. You only took 1 damage per round from the poison. The damage wasn't the problem, but it gave us the poison condition. So we all had disadvantage on our attack rolls and our ability checks. And, we already lost the Artificer, so he's dead. So now there's only the 3 of us. We're all like half health. We're fighting some boss monster with lair actions, and then it turns out they had some like cultists that were hiding in the room with it, and one of them was invisible and dropped a cloud kill spell on the party, which I couldn't counterspell because he was invisible, so I couldn't see him casting. So at that point I was like, yeah, let's just get out of here. And then the Ranger had a great idea. She's like, you know what, let's just go back to the temple and pay them to cast Hero's Feast on us tomorrow. And then when we go in, we're all going to be immune to the poison. I was like, that is a great suggestion, because the poison, like the disadvantage in all the attack rolls, was what was really killing us that fight. Anyways, that's enough on the survivability. You get the idea. So lastly, teamwork or synergy or whatever we want to call it, right? I feel like this character, this is something I usually start working out with. I don't really multi-class for this purpose usually, unless we have a specific reason in mind. But this is something that you can work out with your party members. So just as a quick example, going back to my Sorlock or my Sorcerer Paladin in the Prince of the Apocalypse campaign, and Jade as Bard. One combo that we use is she'll use Dissonant Whispers on a target that I'm currently meleeing, and then when it runs away, I can get an opportunity attack. But I already told him, I'm like, next level, I'm taking Warcaster, which means that since I have Booming Blade from Sorcerer, I can use my opportunity attack to cast a cantrip instead. And now when they move away, they're going to take a bunch of Booming Blade damage from the initial hit, and the Booming Blade damage from moving. So that combo that we're already using is just going to way better. Now, one of the best things on Ning Ning is the Restrain condition, because Web and Black Tentacles both cause Restrained, which gives advantage to my allies trying to attack the restrained target. And one of the downsides of... one of the downsides of using Sharpshooter is that -5 hit penalty. So if they have advantage on their attacks, this is a huge boost. It means that they're basically not missing. They both have the archery fighting style. They both have magic bows or hand crossbows. So that stuff all does help a lot. But, you're still missing. But with advantage, you're almost never missing. And then they're able to just put in that +10 from Sharpshooter over and over and over again. Another thing that, one of the things I like about Hunger of Hadar is that it can cause obscurement. It can blind enemies. This is especially good against enemy casters who might want to target others with spells. Almost every spell you can think of that's a combat damaging spell or even a control spell requires you to be able to see the target. Even most of the mobility spells, there are obviously a few exceptions. There's Teleport, there's Dimension Door, but stuff like Misty Step, you got to be able to see where you're teleporting to. And so if you can blind them, Hunger of Hadar can be really good. However, it can also be very anti-teamwork, because there are times when your party members want to shoot that guy, and now they can't see him either. So this is one of the reasons I like Black Tentacles more. And once we get Telekinesis, also that one, because we can restrain guys. We're not blinding my own party members. We're not blinding them, but, blocking their line of sight, right? And now they can have advantage and attack that target and just kind of burn that target down even faster. So I do love that aspect as well. Also, we don't have it yet, but when we have the Imp, he can fly around invisibly and give somebody the help action to give them advantage on an attack. I also have, how did I not mention this in survivability? Silvery Barbs. But this is also a nice teamwork spell, because if an enemy, let's say they got a crit on one of our party members, I can use Silvery Barbs and force them to re-roll it. I can also force them to re-roll a saving throw, which I've almost never used, but I did use it on Psychic Lance, because one of the enemies needed like a 17 or better, and then it rolled like a nat 20 on its saving throw, and I was like, I'm just going to Silvery Barbs that, because its chances of making it again aren't great. And it failed the next time, so that was good. But, I can do that and then give an ally advantage. Usually the rogue. That way he's guaranteed to be able to make a sneak attack, And that kind of stuff is really nice. But like I said, when the imp is in play, which will start next level, then we've got him. He can give people the help action. Our Eldritch Knight had a owl familiar, but Mike, the DM, would just kill it constantly. So it has flyby, right? So that's not the problem. The problem is it would fly in, help somebody, fly out, and then one of the enemies would just shoot it and kill it. And that just happened after like 5, 6, 7 fights in a row. Jade was just like, I'm getting really sick of summoning this familiar over and over and over again, especially when I'm trying to save up my money to buy full plate armor. And it's like, yeah, it's only 10 gold, but boy, that starts adding up when you're looking at your money total going down instead of up, and you're looking at 2,000 gold for full plate. You're like, yeah. But the imp doesn't have that problem because he's invisible. He can also do things like I could give him a bag of holding, and he could fly around with a bunch of healing potions. And then, instead of me having a mage hand healing potions to a bunch of my allies whenever they go down in combat, because none of them built for survivability like I did, when they go down, instead of me using my action, my imp can bring them up instead. It's just already way better. Just thinking about it is so much nicer. Anyways, I'm going to try to make this quick. Miscellaneous or more utility. I wasn't really sure where to put this, but I think like the Helm of Teleportation kind of falls in here. Yes, it could be exploration. It could be survivability in combat. Like the last time I used it to just evac the party out of a potential TPK. But a lot of times it just fills that niche of like whatever we need, the Helm of Teleportation can do. I think that Wall of Force also falls into this category, and so does Telekinesis, once I get that. All of them have obviously great combat utility. Wall of Force is one of the best crowd control spells. Telekinesis is a phenomenal crowd control spell, and unlike Black Tentacles or Hunger of Dar, it's good against flying enemies, which, some of these things aren't so much, right? Telekinesis is just really, really good in general. But it can also just move objects, heavy objects. It lasts 10 minutes. It can lift up to 1,000 pounds with it. That you can move 1,000 pounds 30 feet in 6 seconds in one combat round. So in 10 minutes, you can do a lot of excavating, is what I'm saying. Wall of Force, and you can make sky bridges with it. You can use it to do crazy things. Like we've had adventures where we had to shoot something, and it was over a pit of lava or something. And the wizard used Wall of Force, and he just angled it like a ramp. So the stuff would fall, hit the Wall of Force, and just slide down onto the ground and avoid the lava pit or the acid pit. I talked about when we were doing White Plume Mountain, and I used Wall of Force to make a bridge through this spinning cylinder of death. So there's this locked door on the other side of the cylinder with a slit, and these guys would throw a burning torch in, and everything in the cylinder is coated in some sort of magical grease. So our rogue tries going through, but of course Paul's playing the rogue, so he instantly fails his dex save, his dex check, even though he's a rogue, and goes tumbling around, and then lights on fire, takes a bunch of damage. We have to pull him back out with a rope, right? The next time he tries, he passes the first 2 dex checks, fails the third one, and goes tumbling around, burning and catching on fire, and we have to pull him back out with a rope. And, after that, I was like, let's just take a long rest. I can get back some charges on my staff, and let's just build a telekinetic bridge through the burning cylinder. And yeah, we're going to take some fire damage, but we're not going to be tumbling around either. And then we can just either lockpick that locked door, or break it down, or whatever we got to do to get through that other side. And, there's so many things you can do like that with things like Wall of Force, right? It's just a great, great spell. As far as other stuff, I have Sending, which is very nice, right? I've used Sending a few times, including during our one siege in Saltmarsh, to contact the Lizard Queen, my BFF, and get her to come back and help us. And ended up being one of the turning points in that battle. I've got Fly. Now this is partly because the Staff of Power gives me things like Fireball, so I don't have to worry about it. But it's also partly because I'm an Aberrant Mind Sorcerer. and I get a bunch of free spells. So if like I said earlier, if you have to take, let's say we take slow, we take counterspell, and we take fireball. Well, it's hard to fit fly in. But in this case, I'm like, well, you know what? So I had Dispel Magic at one point, but then the Bard had Dispel Magic. So I traded it out for fly. And that's when I remember talking about in our Salted Saltmarsh campaign, we were doing White Plume Mountain, and over again, there's like 20 different times where we needed the fly spell and I didn't have it. And then one time when we needed Dispel Magic, and I did have it. So at least that time it was useful. But after that, when the Bard joined us, I was like, man, I am ditching Dispel Magic because the Bard can take that, and I'm just going to grab fly instead, right? And then I've never gone back, even though it would be nice to have Dispel Magic, because we no longer have the Bard, or the Cleric, or anybody else who had Dispel Magic. But, you can't always have everything, right? The point is, I also have Summon Aberration. Now, this could also fall into the damage. It could fall into teamwork. It can help tank, right? We could have a Slab that regenerates. We can have a Flying Beholder. We did this already. And the Kenku Rogue just rode around on him while shooting guys with his hand crossbow. And because the Beholder has a hover speed, it's actually incredibly safe for him to just fly around it. And the Kenku's small and the Beholder is medium, so there's nothing wrong with that. Honestly, we could have thrown the Gnome one there as well, but he's too busy riding around on his Steel Defender. Or he was before they fell into a vat of toxic chemicals, of course. Again, there's a lot of things that you can do. We tried to save the Gnome after he fell into the toxic tank by sending my Beholderkin into the tank to find him. But unfortunately, it doesn't have blind scent, and the creatures that were feeding on him did, and they just dragged his body down to the bottom and ate him along with his 4,000 gold and the Ione Stone of Reserve that I'd given him. I missed that Ione Stone. And obviously the Artificer as well, of course. Actually, I'm just joking. The Artificer was actually my squire, and I was going to knight him. And I'm so glad I told him this at the start of the night. I kind of let it slip out that when we came back, he wasn't going to be my squire anymore. And he was like, whoa, why not? What did he do wrong? I'm like, nothing. He's been awesome, which is why I'm going to make him a knight. And he was all happy. And then he died, of course. So that never happened. Anyway, this video is long enough. I think we can kind of wrap things up here. The point is that when I look at when I multi-class and what I'm trying to get, I will often look at okay, this class has this, right? Fighter has Action Surge. But then what subclasses from Fighter might I want? Now maybe we don't want one, like I said, right? Maybe we only want 2 levels. That can be fine. But maybe 3 is the right amount. Maybe we can grab all this stuff and add it to our Paladin. Maybe going with a Fathom Warlock would have been cool, but what we actually needed was a Mytho Breastplate and a Sentinel Shield and 20 armor class, so we don't die like everybody else has died so many times in this campaign, because some of these fights are insanely difficult, especially when you're poisoned and have disadvantage, and you're fighting a boss with invisible casters, and the boss has lair actions, and he spews toxic chemicals on the ranger and takes her from 90% hit points to 20% hit points because she missed her saving throw. Yeah, and then you're just we need to teleport out of here. Anyway, the point is that if you're planning, you can add all 3 of these things. And the reason I say I list them in this order, like I said, because specializing is way better than generality. Utility is nice, but I even did an entire video called Utility in Dungeons & Dragons is Overrated. And I stand by that statement. But that doesn't mean that utility is worthless, just because a lot of people think it's a 10 out of 10 thing to pursue, and I think it's a 6 out of 10. It's still a 6 out of 10. That's not bad. It's just, if I was multi-classing Warlock for Familiar, that would be bad. If I'm multi-classing Warlock so I can push guys into my persistent AoE spells, and I'm grabbing armor and a shield while I'm at it, and I'm grabbing Hexblade's Curse, then why not get the familiar too? And that's kind of my point here, right? So let's just wrap up the video. Hopefully I didn't ramble too long. I know this video is going to be kind of long, but these are the core ideas of what I think about when I'm trying to multiclass and when I plan out my character. What I want to do, how do I make that thing better, what else can I grab in the process of making it better, and if I can add more utility without sacrificing these first two, even better. Anyways, that's everything. Feel free to like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the comment section. Bye.